I'm going to wait to see who all is able to hop on here, and we're going to kick off day 2 of prep week in our training. All right. Hi, Aubrey. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can now.
Oh,
It looked like I had
hold on. Maybe, are you muted? Hi, Stacy. Let me see. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, I can't hear you, Aubrey. Are you muted?
I'm not muted.
Hold up here. So sorry, guys.
Trying.
Oh, okay, there we go. It could have been my volume. Stacy, can you hear us?
Yeah, now. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think we're good.
Okay.
Stacy, I'm glad you're able to join us.
Yeah, I tried.
Guys. Okay. Aubrey, do we want to wait just a minute to see if we get anybody else, or?
Yeah, I think we might as well just wait a couple more seconds and
that sounds good.
I know sometimes Zoom takes a minute to connect for some people, especially if you're using it the first time.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Stacy, were you okay with like all the tornado stuff going on last night?
We were North Fairfield, just like a mile or so up from where we are, because we're at 35 in North Fairfield, so just a little ways up. It was really bad, like Chick-fil-A and the old abuelos and everything. It's crazy. It was scary. We were in our living room because we don't have a basement. So we were like trying to find some spot away from windows with all the pillows in the house around just in case. So yeah.
We were like in our tub telling the girls like stories and trying not to make it a big deal, like make it a fun thing. We're like,
oh.
Even though inwardly you're like, okay, I hope my house doesn't blow away on me tonight.
Yes. Aw, well, I'm glad you guys are safe.
Yeah.
So scary. Well, you guys were supposed to have at least a similar forecast in Iowa tonight. So I'm hoping no.
Oh, Bridget's joining us. Bridget, we can't see you. So if you want to, oh, there we go. We see ya. I see ya. Hi, Bridget. Hey, Aubrey, if we want to just kind of kickstart, I'm not sure if we'll have anybody else. They can feel free to join us. If we see anybody else hop on, we'll just kind of give the announcement about muting. But if you want to, dive in.
Sounds good. Well, hi, ladies, and we're so excited that you're here. As Rachel mentioned, for those of you who are catching the replay, you can still post questions below, and Rachel and I will respond to those later. And we hope you've been able to check out some of the resources so far that have been posted on our group page. Check them out. If you haven't been able to, you can kind of work your way through those throughout the week. And if you haven't caught the training that we did yesterday, I know it was Memorial Day, so it was trickier to be live. Go ahead and watch that replay as we talk about whole food nutrition and some of the food components to the program. But tonight we're actually going to be diving into carb cycling, as well as our faster way food cycle, and going into a bit more about those details and the science behind carb cycling, and even giving you some food ideas as we go through each day together. And so I know Rachel's gonna kind of kick us off with talking a bit more about what carb cycling is and what it looks like. So Rachel, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Aubrey. Okay, so yeah, I love the science behind this, guys. Guys, one of the things that gravitated me towards faster way to fat loss is the science behind it and the techniques. Like, I'm a science teacher. I'm like, wow, these techniques can work and they're natural for our body. So before I dive into like carb cycling, let me just briefly talk about what a carbohydrate is. We talked about it yesterday when we focused on whole food nutrition. It is a macronutrient, but it's a very important macronutrient because carbohydrates are the body's primary source of energy. So we depend on those carbohydrates because every cell in our body needs them for energy purposes. When we intake carbohydrates, your body is going to basically break it down into a simple form called glucose. It will travel in your blood, and your blood's going to deliver that glucose to all the cells in your body and then the cells will actually transform that glucose into a usable form of energy for the cell. Now, when we take in excess carbs, so I'm a big carb fan, as we should be, but if I'm overindulging in my carbohydrates, this is what our body is going to do. If you're not using that glucose, that simple carbohydrate, you don't use that right there, body is actually going to store it in a complex form called glycogen. And you'll store that glycogen in liver and muscle cells. So that's where we're going to store excess carbohydrates. If you're taking in even more carbohydrates and you run out of places to actually store the glycogen, so we have no more room in our muscle cells, no more room in our liver cells, your body is actually going to store it as fat, which none of us obviously want. So this is why we actually do something called carb cycling in the faster way to fat loss. It's an incredible technique where we basically just vary our carbohydrate intake. And we do that intentionally because it's going to help us control hunger, and it's also going to help us burn fat. So let me kind of dive into like what a low carb day will look like in the body, like scientifically what happens. So on a low carbohydrate, we limit the amount of carbs that we're taking in. And Aubrey's going to talk about this. You've probably read up on it, but we take in like less than 50 grams of net carbs for most of us ladies. When we take that in, we take in those carbs, we're kind of restricting it. Your body's like, hey, I'm running on glucose. I need glucose here. So you actually tap into your glycogen stores, that complex carbohydrate. You pull that glycogen out. I'm just flexing here for you. We pull that glycogen out of, it's a bad flex, out of our liver cells and our muscle cells, and we break it down into that simple form glucose so our cells can use that for energy purposes. Now, if we actually limit our carbs like we do in the faster way to fat loss, we have 2 low carb days back to back. That's intentional because we want to really limit those carbs so we actually deplete our glycogen stores. When you deplete your glycogen stores in your muscle and your liver cells, your body's then going to tap into fat, which is your secondary source of energy. So instead of being a sugar burner, you're now going to be a fat burner. And that's what we want to see happen. Now you might be thinking, okay, Rach and Aubrey, if like we're burning fat on low carb days, why don't we just live a low carb lifestyle, like a keto lifestyle? And here's why. Carbohydrates are so important for us because they give us, as we mentioned yesterday, valuable micronutrients that our body depends on. They're going to actually rev up and help us with metabolism. And they're also going to be very important to actually help get us through our actual strength training workouts. And they're crucial to hormone balance, especially with us ladies. We need those carbs for optimal hormone production. So that's why we need our carbs. So the nice thing about this, we have 2 low carb days followed by our normal macro days, which are high carbohydrate intake days. This is the beauty behind it. When you follow those high carb days after low carb days, you are going to take in a lot of carbs. And sometimes that's scary for us, but it's okay because one, it's going to power you through your strength workouts. We've prepared you and have actually given strength training workouts for those days where we have high amount of carbs coming in. And secondly, you've depleted your glycogen stores. So your body, instead of all that glucose that you're taking in, those excess carbs, instead of storing excess as fat, you're just going to replace what you lost in your muscle cells and your liver cells. So it's incredible. You're constantly going to be burning fat, which that's what we want to see, right? So that gives you a little bit of science behind it. I'm going to give you an analogy real quick, and then I'll toss this back over to Aubrey here. I like to think of it like this, okay? I do really well with analogies because it helps me remember it and, I don't know, just think in different terms. So think of yourself going on your grocery haul. So you're at the beginning of your week, you're running low, right? You pack up your kids, you pack yourself up, you get to the grocery store, you bring home your grocery haul, and if you're like us, we eat maybe a little bit of that then and there when we get home. We use some of that right now. Any excess we store in our refrigerator or in our pantry. Anything beyond that gets placed into our freezer. I want you to think of that in terms of your body, okay? When you take in glucose, the primary places, if we're not using it then and there, we're going to store it in liver muscle cells. That's our fridge and our pantry. Any excess beyond that gets put in, it's a fat store. That's our freezer. So if you're anything like us, like our family, here's our problem. We might actually deplete what's in our refrigerator and what's in our pantry pretty like we'll use that glycogen, we'll use the food in there. But if you're like us, instead of actually going to our freezer and tapping into that, we just go back to the grocery store. So that's kind of what we do in our bodies. We might deplete the glycogen in our liver and muscle cells, but we just refuel. We introduce carbs again, and so we never tap into our fat stores. And that's why this is going to work. It's going to work for you. It's going to help you burn fat, and you're going to love it, I promise. So I'm going to transition this over to Aubrey so she can kind of give you an idea of what the low carb days look like, our higher carb days look like, that whole food cycle.
Awesome. Thank you, Rachel. And thank you for the great science information behind this strategy, because I think that's so important and fascinating to know all of that. And so Rachel went into the background as to kind of what happens on each day, at least in terms of our bodies. And you'll notice that with our carb cycle, where we have low and high carb days, the faster way to fat loss actually strategically pairs a workout that is best for our bodies on those particular days. So I'll talk about that as well. And you'll notice this whether you've looked at the schedule or the carb cycle in the portal, or if you look at the photo album in our group page, it also has the food cycle or that carb cycle. But we kind of look at the week Monday through Sunday. So we consider like the start of a week on Monday, and you'll probably see that throughout this week as well. And so Monday and Tuesday are low carb days. And so as Rachel mentioned, on those days, the purpose is to deplete our glycogen stores, tap into our fat stores for fuel. And really, in light of that, the types of workouts that we do, should you choose to participate in those, are either HIIT training, which stands for high intensity interval training, or cardio. And we're very selective about the days that we do cardio. So the purpose is to get your heart rate up, to use glycogen and fat to fuel your workout. And then doing that back to back 2 days in a row really revs up that fat burning. One of the questions we get a lot, especially in regard to workouts, is do you have to or should you do your workouts in a fasted state? And the answer really is whatever works for you, because a workout completed is better than one that's not completed, right? And so with that said, if you can work out fasted, so before you break your fast, there are some additional fat burning benefits to that because you're burning through glycogen and fat faster. But again, it's not required. You will still notice physical differences and build lean muscle. So just wanted to throw that out there as well. With low carb day, and I mentioned we are strategic with cardio, those are really the only 2 days of the week that we do cardio specific work. So whether that's high intensity interval training where we're getting up that heart rate, or it's sprints, which we'll talk about more because there's a lot of options for those, that's kind of what those days are focused on. With low carb specifically, our goal is to have 50 net grams of carbs or less, unless you are pregnant or breastfeeding or a guy, or perhaps you have a medical condition that would really involve needing more, then that goal would be 100 net grams or so. Now, net carbs. So what that is your total carbs minus fiber equals net carbs. And the reason why we're able to subtract fiber is because it's not digested and we don't derive calories from it like we do some of those other nutrients. And so on a low carb day, it kind of doesn't matter. Now, we don't look at fiber or track fiber specifically the rest of the food cycle. This is just specific to low carb days. So for example, you may have like 80 total carbs on low carb day, but if you have 30 or more grams of fiber, then that gives you your net carbs and a little bit of wiggle room for you. The bulk of our nutrition on a low carb day is actually going to come from fat. For a lot of ladies, especially getting started. Yeah, Rachel's doing a happy dance. You should, because it's amazing. This is healthy fat, and fit fats or healthy fats will not make you fat. Our body really does need this. And it's a very satiating macro. So there are more calories per gram in fat than there are in protein or carbs. So you may feel more full as you are eating fat. But something important to know is that this isn't a low calorie day. So even though we're reducing our intake of carbs, fat is really high and kind of makes up that difference. So you might be like 85 grams to 100 grams or more of fat that's needed on a low carb day. Rachel and I can help as you're getting more into how to track macros. Don't worry about that too much right now, but keep that in the back of your mind that fat will take up about 60 to 70% of your macro pie chart once you look and you see what that is. But in terms of grams, it will be really high. Protein stays the same every day of our food cycle. It's really the only macronutrient that's not going to adjust on the carb cycle. The reason for this is that if our bodies have more protein or kind of a lot of excess protein than what we need, that eventually can get stored as fat if it goes unused as fuel. And so it's important for us to keep that the same. I know that can seem counterintuitive to some as well, because we think, oh, protein's fine. Like if I just have more protein and more fat, but there really is kind of that strategy behind it and why we want to keep that the same. So again, kind of as a recap, your carbs are going to be low. Protein will be moderate or the same every day. Your fat will be really high on a low carb day. In terms of food, and Rachel, feel free to chime in if there's some items that stand out that you and your family like to eat. I do a lot of protein, of course, but a variety of healthy fats on low carb day just to kind of keep it interesting. Truthfully, low carb days tend to be my most simple meals. I'm talking lots of like breakfasty food, easy microwavable stuff if you don't mind doing that. So for example, bacon and eggs. I will often have jerky to snack on throughout the day. Fatty meats are good. So if you have like steak or even seafood like salmon, those are wonderful go-tos. Sausage, nuts, nut butter, so peanut butter, almond butter, etc. You can do ghee, which is clarified butter where the milk fat is taken out. Avocado could be your best friend on a low carb day if you like it. There are some carbs in there, but it's a great go-to for healthy fats. And then a great way to get in some of those fit fats is through healthy cooking oil. So whether that's making your own salad dressing or sauteing your food or your meat or whatever that is in healthy oil, there's a lot of different options for that. Avocado oil, coconut oil, olive oil, those are going to be great ways to increase that fat without feeling like you have to continually eat. Mm-hmm. And then before I go into another point, I will say berries are a lower carb fruit. There are quite a few fruits that are higher in complex carbs, but berries are lower. Mm-hmm. Tend to eat, like I said, a lot of nuts, chicken salad, egg salad, BLTs with avocado and a lettuce wrap. I do easy, as I mentioned, so like microwavable bacon and sausage, scrambled eggs, Mexican dishes like fajitas with guacamole, lots of shakes, but with berries. So kind of being selective, and you'll get the hang of it as you start to track food in MyFitnessPal. You'll be able to see what foods are made up of primary macronutrients, and that's very eye-opening. So it'll be a learning experience. It doesn't need to be perfect at first. And Rachel and I highly recommend, and I know, Rachel, you're going to talk about MyFitnessPal, but as much as you can pre-plan and enter food in MyFitnessPal ahead of time, it will help you be so much more successful in terms of staying on track. Yes. That was such a good eye opener for me when I first did the faster way, because I was like, okay, I'm going to have a banana on low carb day. And it was like 30 net grams or 30 net carbs, excuse me. So I was like, okay, maybe I won't opt for that because I'm going to get all my carbs in the day. So Rachel, anything that you want to add about maybe some tips with food?
I think you hit on all the great suggestions, Aubrey. One thing, this is the day we grill out. We go to all the good veggies. We douse those babies in coconut oil, olive oil, all that sort of stuff. Get on that steak and get that good fat in. One thing I do notice a lot of clients, specifically women, we just kind of struggle with like, oh, this, we see like our pie chart is predominantly red. And we're like, I can't have all this fat. But as Aubrey said, these are good fats. If you're struggling, we almost want to see that fat double, as she had said, because we're restricting or limiting our carbs. So we need those calories to come from somewhere else. And then we'll kind of tap in on under eating and why it's so negative for our bodies. But one way I kind of encourage clients, like if you're really struggling to get in that fat, like I'm so full, I can't get this in. I love to put like NCT oil. It's a great go-to to like put in your coffee, throw in a smoothie. You won't taste it. You don't notice a difference. That sort of thing. Even coconut oil, I don't mind putting into my coffee. Those are good ways to like increase my fat without really like knowing. And I love berries, as Aubrey said, they're low carb. And then I love Cocoa Whip. So go to your store, go get you some Cocoa Whip, because you're going to love Cocoa Whip on those berries. And that's a good fat as well to kind of put with those berries, especially if you have like a sweet tooth like me. Yeah. So
love that.
Yeah.
And Rachel hit on this a little bit, but initially we tend to see clients accidentally undereat the most on a low carb day. And then eventually it typically becomes everybody's favorite. Not that we don't love carbs, but they just tend to start to get the knack for low carb day and develop a love for it, even though it's tricky at first. So want to encourage you in that way, just to make sure you are still consuming enough on low carb day. Because again, it's not a low calorie day. We're just kind of swapping the macros a little bit. And if you don't have MyFitnessPal Premium, which you don't need and it's not required, MyFitnessPal Premium lets you customize your days so you can actually change what your gram goal totals look like. You're welcome to do that if you want to, but just a heads up that if you use the free version, which again is totally fine, it looks like you're not meeting your goals on that day, on a low carb day, but you will be, because you're going to be knowing what you need to do. And we can kind of walk you through how to do that.
And one way to make sure that you are, we don't want you to specifically focus on calories, but one way we know that you're under eating is if you're not hitting your calories. So if you're like, I don't know if I've had enough fat, I'm under 50 grams net carbs, I don't know if I've had enough fat, though I hit my protein, but how do I know about fat? Look at your calories. If you're still 400, 500 calories below, you got to get some more fat in you.
Yeah, great point, Rachel. Great point. Let's transition then to regular macro day. So a regular macro day is Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday. So we just talked low carb is Monday, Tuesday. Regular macro is Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday. Regular macro simply means higher carb day. So it is exactly what your MyFitnessPal gram goals tell you. You're meeting that for all three macros, which is super easy, right? Because that's the first time where we have that 50% carbs, 30% fat, 20% protein macro splits. And if you haven't gone in MyFitnessPal, you'll know what we're talking about soon. So with that, Rachel talked about the science behind it, but we've just come from low carb day. As you start replenishing those carbs, you're just building back up that glycogen versus your body storing it as fat, which is fantastic. On a regular macro day, specifically Wednesday, I'll just give you the advice now. You may feel really lethargic because you've just had 2 days of minimal carbs. Wednesday morning, you might be struggling. So listen to your body, but that's so normal just because of that lower carb content that we've come from. And so on a regular macro day, we pair those days with strength training, where we're working our back, our arms, our legs. That comes on Saturday. And additionally, Saturday is often everybody's favorite day because we work in your treat of choice. So you just fit it in with the rest of your macros. It's not considered a cheat day. So the whole day isn't just a wash, but usually my family does donuts. We have a tradition where we go to a local donut shop, we get some, we enjoy it. I just work it into my macros for the day. And because you're doing a leg workout and our legs are our largest muscle group in the body, you're burning a ton of calories while also building muscle.
Yes.
So foods that are higher in carbs, and Rachel said this earlier, but you may be surprised by your carb gram goal. Mine is over 220. Everybody's looks different. So if yours is at 220, don't worry, but that's just mine, which shocked me when I first started because I was like, what? But focus on complex carbohydrates. Fruits and vegetables are really high in this, specifically root vegetables, potatoes, sweet potatoes, carrots, bell peppers. I love to have rice and oatmeal. I do a lot of Asian inspired dishes on regular macro day as well. Fruit juices are actually high in carbs, and it's a great way to get some of those carbs in. If you're like, I can't eat another bite, have some orange juice or something, and that's a really easy way to get that in. Quinoa, spiralized veggies, you maybe even do a gluten-free or a chickpea pasta. I know we went into some of those ideas yesterday when we talked about whole food, but those are a bit higher in carbs and might be some go-tos that you want as well. Rachel, anything else with that before we hit on low macro?
I feel like you hit on those, like the quinoa. I love couscous. I mean, those things are my go-to, and I love overnight oats, doing those sorts of things. They're great protein. And in fact, I'll share, and maybe you have one of these as well, Aubrey. I'll share my Pinterest board with, I have like a high macro day, or like high carb day, a low carb day, just to give some ideas. But we do want to encourage, like, start off simple. Don't like start tackling these recipes, because it's just going to be a little bit more difficult when you get to the tracking part, which we'll talk about in a minute.
Yeah, definitely. And with that said, I buy a lot of frozen stuff. I mean, fresh is great and fresh is always better, right? But I'll do like pre-spiraled frozen veggies. Or I'll do the 90-second microwavable rice, just keeping it as easy as possible. So lastly in the cycle is low macro day. And that is Friday and Sunday. This is also strategically paired with a rest day where you can opt to not do a workout, or you can do kind of a longer duration workout like a walk. Maybe if you do a trip to the sauna, you can do that. I will be honest, most rest days, I don't do anything. If anything, it's like a walk with my family, but take those rest days seriously. They are so critical for muscle repair and just giving your body the downtime it needs, lowering your cortisol levels. We'll talk more about rest as we go through the program, but that's one of the things that I love and appreciate most about the Faster Way, is that in addition to whole food nutrition being the basis of the program, the next most important element is rest. And again, that's Friday and Sunday. As we go throughout the program, we will also talk a little bit about, maybe even in the Q&A section, Rachel, about flexing days or swapping days as you need to, because there is some flexibility to doing that. But low macro is scheduled for Friday and Sunday. What that means is that we're consuming less of each macro. So kind of what it sounds like. The goal is 25% of each macro, which again is carbs, protein, and fat. So it does involve a little bit of simple math. You'll just take your gram goal totals for each macro and then end up subtracting 25%. One of the tips that I have is do it once and jot it down somewhere or save it to the notes in your phone. Some ladies have even taken screenshots of their MyFitnessPal goal, and they will use like their edit feature to add in their low macro day goals on top of it so they can easily reference it. And I love that. So do whatever is easiest for you. And the reason why we are consuming less is because we aren't completing a workout, and thus we don't need that additional fuel to get us through that workout. But we do this only those 2 days a week. We recommend you not doing it back to back, which is why we have that day in between, so that we're not under eating and really undersatisfied for workouts later on. But for those 2 days specifically, that is low macro.
Yeah.
And on low macro day, by the way, is really the same types of foods that you would eat on regular macro. You can have all of that. It's just a little bit less overall.
Yes. Yeah, that's great, Aubrey. One thing I would encourage you to do, we shared, I'm just going to talk about this briefly. Aubrey, were you, sorry, I don't know if I cut you off. Were you good? Okay.
No, I'm good. Yeah, you go for it.
I'm just sorry. Our whole transition, Aubrey and I are working on that. I need to work on it more, clearly. So let me briefly talk about the MyFitnessPal app. We're not going to keep you much longer here. There are some great videos in the portal that we directed you today in the post. So make sure you go back to those videos in the portal. Amanda does a great job on her video walking you through that. But I took a step further when I had my mom join Faster Way to Fat Loss, and she loves living the Faster Way lifestyle. She struggled with watching the video and trying to set it up. So I created a Google Doc that goes step by step and gives you pictures of what it should look like. So you'll put in your settings, and I show you what that looks like. And in that document, we also show you what like a low carb day looks like percentage-wise on the MyFitnessPal app. on the low macro day, I kind of show you how to do the math. So if I have 220 grams of carbs, I multiply that by 0.25 and get this, and I subtract it. So we walk you step by step. And I think that will be easier for you to follow than us to like keep talking to you about that. So definitely check out those resources and know that Aubrey and I are here to check with you, make sure you feel comfortable with it. No question is a silly question. Put it in the thread. And often your question is going to be somebody else's question. So we want to see the question in the thread, like on the daily post. Unless it's like a personal question, then feel free to reach out to both of us or one of us. Obviously, you can do that. Let me just kind of mention too, when you actually set up your MyFitnessPal app, make sure you screenshot your nutrient page. And the nutrient page, I'll just kind of briefly show you. It looks like this. It's very, actually, that's not the nutrient page. Well, I'm not going to waste time pulling it up. But it's, yeah, I'm not going to waste that time. So make sure I walk you through in the Google Doc on how to do that. We would just want to make sure that you're not under eating, like your macros are actually needing what your body needs. Because when we are under eating, it actually is going to kill our metabolism. And here's the thing, many of us are coming to faster way to fat loss because something wasn't working. Either this calorie deficit diet we tried before, something wasn't working, okay? Or we were kind of up and down on all these different types of diets. This will work because in a calorie deficit diet, you're decreasing the amount of calories, the amount of macronutrients your body needs. So your body goes into this conservation mode. It's like, hey, Rach isn't going to feed me. So what am I going to do? I'm going to save this for a rainy day. So instead of actually burning through fat, we're actually going to store it up. And here's the thing, you might see progress initially with calorie deficit diets because you are restricting calories. So initially you might see weight loss, but eventually you will plateau. Like you will plateau. And what do you have to do? You have to restrict your calories again. There is no way, you can't keep going down. So we're actually going to rev up your metabolism by giving you what your body needs. And when your body knows it can depend on you, you're going to start burning fat. So I just want to encourage you, it might feel like a lot. When you look at your gram goals, you're like, whoa, that's a lot of food. That is good. And we're going to build you up to that. Eat till you're about 80% full, and then just kind of work on hitting those goals eventually. So yeah, we want to see you do that. One other thing I'm going to mention, and feel free to drop in here, Aubrey, with the tracking component, we will start practicing that and implementing it next week. Aubrey had mentioned enter in your foods the night before or the morning of. That's just going to save time when you enter it in. And then all I have to do is go to my phone. I'm like, hey, I got beef jerky on here. I got peanut butter and I know how much. I don't have to stress about it. I know what I need to eat and what I can eat. And I'm going to hit my macrogram goals. One thing we want to really encourage is to keep it simple, as we said before. It's going to be much easier to track if you're like, hey, here's 6 ounces of chicken, or here's a half cup of applesauce. It will be easier to track for you. Realize it doesn't have to be exactly perfect. Nobody expects that. You can still be within 10 grams of your goals and still, meet where we want you to be. One thing though, I know if you're a perfectionist like me, I had friends and family members, they bought like food scales. You are welcome to buy a food scale. You can get one on Amazon, grocery store, wherever you want to buy it. That will definitely help you like track appropriately because you can put the grams in. But here's my thing. If you're a perfectionist like me, don't do it, okay? Because we don't want you to depend on any type of scale, whether it's for our weight or this. This is not meant to restrict you. We want to see food freedom in this program, and that's what we want to see for you. So you can do that, but the moment you feel tied to it or stressed going out with friends, make sure to get rid of that scale. And then one final note, use measuring cups or things like that. Just eye it. Aubrey and I will give you kind of a sheet, like a thumb is like a tablespoon, fist is like 4 ounces. See, I got to double check, but we'll share that with you and you'll get better at eyeing things as you go along. So don't stress about it. Remember, progress over perfection. Anything else you want to add in there, Aubrey?
No, that was great. Thanks, Rachel.
Yeah. Okay. Well, guys, we want to hear your questions. So if you have questions right now, I'm going to unmute you. If we don't have questions, that's quite all right. Hold on. I'm trying to unmute y'all, or you can unmute yourself. Ask your questions, but I might cut cut this in a little bit so we can actually save the recording and put it on the closed Facebook group. And then you can put your comments or questions in the comments below, because eventually this Zoom stops recording. And so I want to make sure that it's all recorded. But any questions right now?
I have kind of jotted down a few questions about things as I've been looking through the portal, and like particularly as it comes to foods and things like that. So I can just put like my little list or whatever on the thread to make it easier, because they're just little simple ones.
Okay.
But I know one thing that they talked about though was basic chain amino acids, and I don't know if that's something that would go into this conversation or a different conversation.
Okay, sorry, Aubrey. I don't mean to step
Take it. Yeah.
BCAAs are great, especially if you struggle at hitting your protein. So we want to encourage you, try to get your protein, and it's not unnatural. BCAAs aren't unnatural, but try to get it through meats and foods like that. I know, like, I sometimes struggle, so I'll put BCAAs in my coffee in the morning. And the nice thing about it, because BCAAs are amino acids, and amino acids are the basic building block of protein. And so it helps us reach our protein gram goals. And it's really nice, though, you can have BCAAs without breaking your fast. So you can actually introduce that in the morning without breaking your fast. And I kind of like it too, if I'm going to do a workout in the morning and I feel a little bit low energy, sometimes that my coffee gets me caffeinated, then the BCAAs, I'm getting just a little bit of, ultimately protein, and that helps me get through that workout. So you can definitely go to BCAAs. The one I like, and I'm going to forget it now. I have it like in my cupboard. We'll share some brands though, for sure.
Okay. Yeah. That's what they said, to like check with you guys for recommendations. So.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Good question, Stacy.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. If we don't have any other questions, thank you guys. We know this is a sacrifice for you, from your family, and from the commitments that you have to do. So we just so appreciate you guys being here. And for those of you that weren't able to be here with us tonight, catch the replay. We know that you guys got busy lives and busy schedules. Make sure you reach out to us if you have questions or concerns, and we are here to meet your need. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.